Messi flying forward. Leo Messi!
United. Rafael Guerrero with the cross. Ronaldo.
Super Falcons head coach Justin Madugo has said his team will make use of another opportunity to earn a place at the 2027 FIFA Women's World Cup in Brazil. And just so you know, we saw some games being played across, different venues at the ongoing Women's Africa Cup of Nations. 2 semi-finals games took place, and guess you what? Algeria lost to Malawi 1-3. That one ended. 2 teams were recorded in that very encounter, but then debutants Malawi are through to the final. They'll face Cameroon, who knocked out host nation Morocco on penalties after regulation time ended goalless with nothing separating either side. Meanwhile, Zambia's striker Barbara Banda and Malawi's Temwa Shawinga are the current joint top scorers at the ongoing CAF Women's Africa Cup of Nations ahead of the final on Sunday. Who wins that one, Cameroon or Malawi? Meanwhile, Bruno Guimaraes made his first appearance and Miles Lewis Kelly scored amid speculation about his future as Arsenal were held to a 1-0 draw by Como, a side led by former player of the Gunners, talking about Frances Fabregas. The Gunners went on to win 4-3 on penalties after regulation time. And meanwhile, Joshua Zexi and Brendan Aronson scored as Manchester United and All Fours. Leeds United played out an entertaining 1-1 friendly draw at the spiritual home of Irish Sport in Dublin before the concluding shootout was edged 5-4 by Michael Carrick's side, talking about the Red Devils. And even more interestingly, Dizena Doe scored the winner as champions of Europe. Paris Saint-Germain beat the Lions Aston Villa by 2-1 to win the UEFA Super Cup. On that note, I say welcome to Sports 360 right here on CEM Television. I'm Danny Miller, the voice you trust and that music you probably need. They call me Rex Patrick the Locker, that homeboy that's never at home. I look around 247-365. I'm your host and guide. Now let's start off with golf, where Rory McIlroy believes this week's FedEx St. Jude Championship will be a good chance for him to assess the current standard of his game as the Northern Irishman returns to PGA Tour action for the first time since the Open. The 2-time Masters champion heads into the first of 3 FedEx Cup playoffs event at TPC Southwind in Memphis, refreshed after 4 weeks away from the course, which included holidays to Greece and Ibiza in Spain. McIlroy, who is ranked 12th in the FedEx Cup standings, can also wrap up his 2026 PGA Tour season on a high note as he bids to win a record-extending 4th FedEx Cup title. The 37-year-old chose to skip last year's FedEx St. Jude Championship and instead took a 4-week break following his tied 7th finish at the Open before returning for the BMW Championship. But ahead of this week's event, the Northern Irishman explained he was excited to tee up as one of 69 players in the field at TPC Southwind, adding he felt it was important to feature in the opening playoffs event. McIlroy has been, open about his desire to reduce his schedule, and on the course he's enjoyed a solid 2026. He successfully defended his green jacket while finishing inside the top 10 in 4 of his 11 PGA Tour starts. After the FedEx Cup playoffs, McIlroy will look to defend his Irish Open title in September before heading to Wentworth to tee up at the BMW PGA Championship. But before then, he faces the challenge of outlasting some of the best players on the PGA Tour across 3 events in the blistering heat of the American South. McIlroy, who has a great record in the PGA Tour's season-ending event, explained his game plan for the 3-week stretching, saying he sees the playoffs as one long golf event. From there, let's move to basketball, where Los Angeles Lakers are set to be sold for a record-breaking $12.5 billion, and that's about 9.2 billion pounds, to George Kushner, the venture capitalist who was at the center of FIFA's proposed new commercial structure. Kushner and former Disney chief executive Bob Iger are set to buy the NBA franchise from Chelsea co-owner Mark Walter. Walter only bought the Lakers last year for a then record £7.4 billion, but is now expected to see a big return on his investment. Walter, who also owns a stake in the LA Dodgers with Todd Boehly, bought a 27% stake in the Lakers back in 2021 before increasing that to about 85% last year. The Bulls family had about 15%, and it is uncertain whether that stake too has been sold to Kushner and Iger. The takeover would require approval from the NBA Board of Governors and comes a month after Kushner's Thrive Capital found itself at the center of a plan to sell off a stake in the World Cup. Kushner's older brother, Jared Kushner, is married to Donald Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump. Iger was CEO of Walt Disney until earlier this very year. Now let's move on to tennis, where Spanish teenager Rafael Jorda's bid for ATP Tour ranking history was put on hold after he was beaten by Brandon Nakashima in the semi-finals of the Canadian Open. Jorda, who's 19, has been hoping to make history in the Montreal for the fastest rise into the top 10 of men's tennis, but his attempt to make a first Masters 1000 final was ended in straight sets by American Nakashima. Nakashima, the 28th seed, had never previously made it past the third round at the tournament, but was too strong for Jorda in a 7-6, 6-4 triumph. Jorda saved 4 match points before Nakashima finally converted his fifth to overcome the world number 15 in 2 hours and 2 minutes of play on IGA Stadium. Nakashima will face defending champion Ben Shilton in an All-American final tomorrow Friday. And Shilton beats competitor talking about Lena Tien in the night second semi-final and said afterwards he was super happy with the performance. In the female draw, at the women's final in Toronto, second-seeded Elena Rybakina beat fourth-seeded Coco Gauff 5-7, 6-2, 6-2 to book a place in the final. Rybakina will play seventh-seeded Iga Swiatek today, Thursday, after the poll saw off 9th-seeded Elena Svitolina 6-3, 1-6, 6-3. The 6th Rybakina finished off Gauff just before 1 a.m. local time to bring the rain-delayed night session to a close. The Kazakh has won the Australian Open and Stuttgart titles this very year, taking her career tally to about 13 titles. In the first semi-final, we saw Swiatek broke Svitolina's serve at love for a 5-3 lead in the third set. Swiatek then jumped out to a 4-love lead before converting her second match point. The match began about an hour after the scheduled start because of rain. So from tennis, we head to football, where interestingly, Super Falcons head coach Justin Madugo says his team will make use of another opportunity to earn a place at the 2027 Women's World Cup in Brazil. The 10-time African champions failed to secure automatic qualification to the global fiesta following the 1-0 defeat against Cameroon in their 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations quarter-final encounter. Nigeria will battle the Bayana of South Africa for a place in the Inter-Confederation playoffs at the Moulay Rashid Stadium, Casablanca, today, Thursday. Madugo has declared that they'll fight hard to beat Desire Ellis' side. He said in his words, and I quote, "We have a second chance. We have a second opportunity. We are still going to do the best that we can. We are not leaving anything out. We are going to put it all our best. Yeah, put in all our best to make sure that we put smiles on the faces of our people, because we know what's at stake, what it means for us as Nigerians. So that's the story going into that one. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire will clash in the other playoff fixture at the Labi Israeli Stadium, Casablanca, tonight. Now let's move on to the ongoing Women Africa Cup of Nations and tell you that, two games were played yesterday as the tournament hits the semi-final stage. Interestingly, Algeria got knocked out by debutants, talking about Malawi. Yeah, the Scotias of Malawi. It ended 1-3. The Shawinga sisters coming through, but then interestingly for both sides, they got red carded in that very one. And now the debutants Malawi are through to the final of the event. In another development, we saw Morocco, host nation, being knocked out. Yeah, regulation time ended goalless with nothing separating either side. But then, on penalties, Cameroon came up tops. 1-3 it ended, and so the Cameroonians are through to the final of the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations right there in Morocco after knocking out the Moroccan side. Yeah, it's quite intriguing to have this coming at this particular time. Meanwhile, Zambia striker Barbara Banda and Malawi's Temwa Shawinga are the current joint top scorers at the ongoing Women Africa Cup of Nations ahead of the final on Sunday. Banda and Shawinga have got 5 goals to their names following the conclusion of the WAFCON semi-final stage on Wednesday. Recall that Cameroon defeated WAFCON host Morocco to set up a final against Malawi, who defeated Algeria in the other semi-final fixture. Now, let's look at the top scorers, WAFCON top scorers so far ahead of Malawi's final against Cameroon. Now, for Barbara Banda, she's top on the log with 5 goals. Yeah, Barbara Banda of Zambia, she's got 5 goals to her name, and Temwa Shawinga has also got 5 goals. So for Temwa Shawinga, she has a really good chance of finishing as a top scorer at the Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco. She is through to the final with, Himalayan side. They face Cameroon. Meanwhile, Ines Konyan of Ivory Coast, has got 4 goals, and Tabita Shawinga, Temba Shawinga's sister, has got 4 goals to her name, and she's got a really good chance of finishing as a top scorer. All right, if she gets to score in the final, score more than 2, or up to like 2 goals to topple her sister, probably. Wait to see. Meanwhile, for those who have scored 3 goals, we got Temba Katlana of South Africa and Mary Nga of Cameroon. So 3 goals. The question is, can Mary Nga score up to 3 goals in the final against Malawi, where she's got the Shawinga sisters also battling for, the top scorer, the golden boot at the tournament. Now, Asisa Oshuala of Nigeria, Mary Dafo of Algeria, Sakina Orawzi of of Morocco, and Uchenna Kano of Nigeria and Rashida Rajibade have got 2 goals apiece, 2 goals to their names so far at the tournament. It's quite interesting to have this coming at this material time. It's been really competitive, talking about the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco. We wait to see who wins the trophy come Sunday. Now let's move to Europe, where we look at some interesting stories making the rounds. Look at club football, where we tell you that Bruno Guimaraes made his first appearance and Miles Lewis Kelly scored amid speculation about his future as the Gunners Arsenal were held to a 1-0 draw by Como, a side led by Frances Fabregas, before the Gunners went on to win 4-3 on penalties. Guimaraes, a £75 million signing from the Magpies, Newcastle United, was introduced at halftime in the pre-season friendly at the Emirates Stadium after Lewis Kelly's opener had been cancelled out by Martin Baturina. Lewis Kelly's own goal stroked home after cutting out a poor pass from Como goalkeeper Jean Bortes came as he linked with an Arsenal exit, has been linked with a move away from the side this very summer. Chelsea made inquiries just yesterday, so he celebrated by making a heart gesture with his hands. Of course, Guimaraes received a warm welcome with his introduction, but Arsenal were unable to find a second half winner before emerging victorious in the post-match penalty shootout, in which Guimaraes and fellow new signing Christos Zolis were among the scorers. Mikel Arteta left out Bukayo Saka, Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi despite their returns from World Cup duty this very week, but they were first cameos of pre-season from their England and Spain teammates Eberechi Eze, David Raya and Mikel Merino, not forgetting Noni Madueke. Arsenal's attention now turns to Sunday's Community Shield against Manchester City at Wembley Stadium before their Premier League curtain raiser against Coventry City, led by Frank James Lampard. So Coventry making a return to the Premier League after winning the English Championship, the 2025-2026. Elsewhere, Joshua Zirkzee and Brendan Aronson scored as Manchester United and Old Foes Leeds played out an entertaining 1-1 friendly draw at the spiritual home of Irish Sport in Dublin before the conclusion shootout was edged 5-4 by Michael Carrick's side. On the eve of the new Premier League season, all the talk was about Marcus Rashford and his reintegration under Michael Carrick, but the 82,000 strong crowd at Croke Park were not treated to a first glimpse of the forward in a Man United shirt for over 18 months. Carrick did hint, however, that he intends to keep Rashford around after he returned from his Old Trafford hiatus in great spirits, adding he gives us something a bit different. Manchester United boss was also kept, he also kept a number of high-profile players in reserve until after the hour mark, instead choosing to give a raft of youngsters a proper run-out. Fullback Harry Amars turned out to be the pick of the rookie pack. The introduction of Bruno Fernandes and new signing Yuri Telemon improved efficiencies late on, combining efficiency to offer Matheus Cunha some pre-season shootout practice, adding to a lively attacking performance from the lesser-seen Zirkzee. Fernandes himself was played through by Luke Shaw in the second period, much to the delight of the pro-Manchester United fan base, who chanted Bruno for large portions of the night, but his strike was flagged offside. He also hammered the crossbar late on in that very encounter. Of those senior regulars who did start, Brian Buemo caught the eye, showing impressive intensity to tee up Zirkzee for the game's opener. Dan James and Aronson were Leeds' conspirators shortly after, to turn home their first of 5 shots on target. Of course, Daniel Farke's side have scored a tidy 10 goals in 5 pre-season outings this summer, albeit they lacked a little composure in the decisive shootout. Now let's look at another story as we tell you that Atletico de Madrid have agreed the deal in principle with Tottenham Hotspur to sign Christian Romero. The package is in the region of about £34.2 million with add-ons, a 15% sell-on clause included. Atletico have been long-term admirers of the Argentina international there was an expectation that Spurs would allow Captain Romero to depart this very summer if the right offer arrived. The central defender, who was always believed to have preferred a move to Atletico, with Nerazzurri talking about Internazionale Milano and Spurs' North London rivals Arsenal among the other clubs who have been interested. Romero's Spurs deal is due to run until the summer of 2029. The 28-year-old was sent off twice last season during Spurs' Premier League relegation battle. He then missed the end of the campaign due to a knee injury. Romero received criticism from supporters when he appeared to be set to watch his boyhood club Belgrano play River Plate in the Argentina Primera Division Apertura final instead of being at Tottenham's crucial last game against Everton. Romero did though attend the final game of the season, in which Spurs secured Premier League survival. He's made about 124 appearances for the club over 5 seasons, scoring 12 goals and being shown 4 red cards in the Premier League. Spurs had appeared to lay the groundwork for Romero's exit this summer following the arrivals of defenders Jan-Paul Van Hecker and Marcos Senesi. Now let's tell you that Chelsea have told Manchester City they have a deadline of 5 p.m. this Friday to make an offer for Enzo Fernandez. City are interested in the midfielder who shared a strong relationship with Enzo Maresca, and who was Chelsea boss. Chelsea value Fernandes at about £120 million. Of course, he's got 6 years left on his current contract right there at the side. If City do not meet Chelsea's demands, they do not intend to sell Fernandes in this window. FC Barcelona's pursuit of Rodri, which saw them have a £40 million be rejected, has raised the prospect of Man City making a late move for Fernandes before the window closes. City have targets in mind for any player who departs, and they are in ongoing talks with deal for Monaco midfielder Ayub Wadi. They've already signed central midfielder Elliot Anderson for £160 million from Nottingham Forest. The Blues have a high valuation for Fernandes, but they signed him for around £107 million from SL Benfica in 2023. The summer transfer window closes on Tuesday, September the 1st. Relationship between City and Chelsea are strained after the acrimonious manner of Maresca's departure from Chelsea. Of course, that's a story right there. And before we leave, let's take a look at what happened yesterday. That's last night in Europe, where we saw an interesting game, a game pitting Aston Villa, the Lions, Aston Villa, and of course Paris Saint-Germain. It happened to be the UEFA Super Cup final, and guess what? It was very much for what it's worth. It was PSG who came up tops, defending champions of the UEFA Champions League, against Europa League winners from last season. And guess what? It was very much an interesting encounter for what it's worth. PSG, they beat Aston Villa by 2-1 to win the Super Cup, and it happens to be their first title going into the new season. And just so you know, there's a doorway. Scott, the winner, as Les Parisien came up top. The 21-year-old raised behind the defense and restored the lead for the Ligue side to ensure they retained the trophy. For Villa went down swinging in what was a highly contested fixture at the Red Bull Arena in Salzburg. Kivica Kvaratskhelia had initially given PSG the lead after cutting inside from the left and wrong-footing Marco Bizot with his well-taken effort. That was in the 20 minutes of that encounter. But the goal on his professional debut for the 17-year-old Brian Maggio sparked Villa into life. The forward became, he became the youngest player to score in the Super Cup after shrugging off the challenge from William Pacho to volley the equalizer home, and arguably should have had more to his name, having seen 3 other chances sail just wide of the target. Villa were without key players Oli Watkins, Ezri Konsa and Emiliano Martinez due to their extended post-World Cup breaks, but the gaps left by senior players provided the likes of Manjo and 19-year-old George Hemmings with a platform to shine in such an encounter. The two teenagers looked at home among world-class opposition, and later came close to responding to the Zeradowe strike seconds after Villa conceded, only for Matvev Safonov to make a fine stop to deny him that very chance. Luis Enrique's side would hold on to start the 2026-2027 campaign with silverware, but were given an almighty scare by Unai Emery's side and his new look squad in a similar fashion to the 5-4 thriller that played out in the Champions League final, when the last match, not the UEFA Champions League, but not the final, but the UEFA Champions League encounter. That was when they met back in 2025. We can't go any further. This is where we get to put it in right here on Sports 360. Been a great time with you out there, and best believe you are the real MVP. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms on YouTube and at CEMTV Plus, and that's at CEMTV Plus on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and of course on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter as well, at CEMTV Plus. Alright, we'll keep you up to speed with some really interesting stories and contents making the rounds. I remain Danny Miller, the voice you trust and that me you probably need. They call me Rex Patrick the Locker, that homeboy that's never at home. I look around 247-365. For now, it's a wrap.